Listen, child, and heed me well. A grave warning you must fear. Get back to bed in silent stay, lest the blackened cap might hear. Shuttered must the windows be, your eyes quickly close them fast, or the bad moon's light you'll see, and the sight will be your last.
In other words, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Fluffenhammer. Roll the music!
Where's that from, Adam? That one I vaguely recognised. What was that from?
That is a nursery rhyme in the Gloomspite book.
I thought it was. The Gloomspite Gits. Yeah.
Yeah.
What an army.
Not the battle tome, the novel. The
novel.
Gloomspite, which, if you haven't read yet, I will have to say, go and frickin' read it because they are terrifying.
It's a good one, yeah?
The Gloomspite are... Jesus Christ, they're scary.
Yeah, I mean, right?
The stuff they've turned them into a horror. That book turns them into a horror race,
which is really cool, isn't it? Considering that, like, in the general background, the Gloomspite Gits are basically the Night Goblins as they were, and they were kind of like a comedy race up until this point. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There's a wonderful bit in the prologue where there's a witch hunter who's walking around the town of Draconium. Oh, that name, Draconium! He's checking out these areas in the lower levels where there isn't any thermal vents because it's AOS, and my God, do they go high concept.
Yeah.
It's just bashing them out the door. You know, it's so good. And he finds a hole next to a pub, next to an inn. And he thinks, right, smugglers, I'm going to look in this hole. He looks in. And he realizes they've been dug with claws. Right.
That's when you get out. If you're in a fantasy setting and you find like a mysterious hole that's been dug with claws, you certainly don't go looking in it.
Yeah, and then his cat, Saint Claus. So good. Or Klaus. It's actually Saint Klaus, but I like to call the cat Saint Claus.
Saint Claus, of course.
The cat freaks out and he gets his legs removed. At high speed. And he's dragged down the hole, never to be seen again. And it is really good.
It's quite frightening, yeah. I mean, it's one of those things, isn't it, with that kind of race? I imagine, like the orcs in 40k, who are often played for laughs, it's difficult to write.
Yeah.
Because you've got to go one way or the other. You either run with the humour and just make it nuts, silly, absurd, or you try to sort of finagle it so they're actually quite threatening.
Yeah. I mean, they tried so many times with the Night Goblins and whatnot back in the old world.
Yeah.
They often talk about them having strangler's fingers, stuff like that. But in this, they're more of the old sort of Fey story of being stolen away in the middle of the night.
Sort of like the changeling, that kind of thing. Yeah.
But instead of being replaced, you're stuck in a mushroom and being used as a prophecy machine.
Right.
It's the next 20 years, you're slowly going to turn into fungus. All right.
That seems to be like what they do, though, isn't it? It seems to be what they're paying attention to with a lot of AOS. They look to sort of Fey folklore, grim fairy tales, that kind of thing.
And also, they steal glass. They steal glass.
Why do they steal glass?
I don't know yet.
They just do.
They just keep stealing glass.
All right, fair enough.
Bizarre.
By the way, guys, yes, this is the Fluffenhammer. Hello, I'm George. This is Adam. And we are joined today by someone who is actually familiar to the podcast, but it's been a very, very, very long time, hasn't it, Tom?
Indeed. Hello. It's very good to be with you today. It's a really good time to be into Games Workshop, and it's fantastic to be able to talk about some of the non-grimdark,
right.
washing in Games Workshop right now. Fantastic time to be on.
Well, it's so weird, isn't it? For people who have like been into Games Workshop for a long time, from the point when it was very much the reserve of Anoraks, to see it now, it's us lot basically. It's as you were saying before we came on, Tom. I mean, you haven't really been into it for like a decade now.
No, I clipped my first piece of plastic over the weekend for the first time in about 8 years, and it feels the perfect time to get back into the hobby, the tabletop hobby. I mean, everyone has the ability to pick up a PlayStation controller and play something, virtual, but to get back into armies and dice and a lot of spray paint, fantastic time to do it.
Yeah, it's so weird how popular it's become. There is this kind of, Adam and I have discussed this before. There is this kind of renaissance happening, isn't there? When it comes to communal gaming of all kinds, not just like war tabletop games, miniatures games, but board games, D&D, RPG role-playing games are just exploding into popularity to the point whereby they are not just this very niche hobby. They're becoming popular. They're becoming mainstream. Yeah,
I mean, I think there's something very true that adversity creates community. And Games Workshop had its first real renaissance in the 1980s after being, founded by Steve Jackson and people like that, when it was a very, very niche hobby. I mean, name the number of people who had fighting fantasy books on their games. But actually, in results, and probably opposition to the kind of the politics and difficulty of the time, because, being a nerd in the 1980s wasn't easy. Whatever Stranger Things might say, it was challenging being different. But Games Workshop really was able to capitalize on that. I mean, they imported a lot of stuff from the US, which otherwise wouldn't have got onto the UK shores, like Call of Cthulhu. They started working up their own material, and this is all in a very depressed economy. And actually, since 2008, when we had a global meltdown, and now we're having a second one, Games Workshop is going from strength to strength.
Yeah, it's very strange to think, isn't it? But as you say, I mean, another thing they did in the 1980s, which was very, very unusual, obviously pre-internet, so it was very difficult for people of like interests, especially if they were unusual or considered somehow to be deviant, I suppose, in some particular way. Very difficult for people to come together or even to learn what those interests were. But Games Workshop provided a setting, an actual culture for people to be able to do that, a kind of safe space, I suppose.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, if you look at the early Warhammer Fantasy Battle book, especially the army list, at the back they had big advertisements. There was an orc standing there saying, "Wag, there's no one left to fight." And Games Workshop were quite instrumental in trying to get people matched up with other hobbyists because they recognized it was in their best interest. But they were, certainly in the early days, incredibly good community builders.
Yeah.
I mean, do you remember when White Dwarf used to run the community lists where they would basically show every single club that was running games in different areas of the country?
I do, yeah.
I mean, that's like 1987, 1988, isn't it? It's, all you had to do was send in the information on the club that you went to, and they would publish it in the magazine.
Wow.
And can you imagine, I don't know, what would be the binary 1-to-1 on that one? Somebody saying his clans that you could join. I don't know. It's a really weird one to try and.
Well, it really does demonstrate just how different the culture is now, doesn't it? The fact that was required back then, and that was really the only way you could do it, unless you had like as most people got into it, where there was like a friend or a friend of a friend, or you went to a friend's house and like an older brother was playing with this stuff and you got curious about it. That was the only way to do it back then, wasn't it? But now it's everywhere. It has become this global phenomenon. Games Workshop are just going great guns at the moment.
Well, not just Games Workshop, TSR are doing absolutely wonderful. I don't know if you know about the Pathfinder series, but Pathfinder is like doing insane numbers at the moment.
Yeah.
A lot of these people are Kickstarter board games are doing better than they've ever done since Kickstarter began.
Have you seen like the massive like theater events that for Dungeons and Dragons, like the Acquisitions Incorporated stuff and whatnot, which sell out theaters?
No idea how much I want to do that.
They sell out theaters, and it shouldn't work. It shouldn't work. It's just guys and girls playing D&D. On a stage, this should not work, but it is absolutely brilliant. By the way, if you haven't gone and watched the Acquisitions Incorporated YouTube channel stuff, it's great. It's so much fun.
Well, one of my favorite podcasts each week is the Glass Cannon Network, and they play Pathfinder.
Right.
And I got through them through their Starfinder game, which was called Androids and Aliens, which is such a great name. I thought, I'm going to have to give that a go. Listen to a few. I thought, I quite like this. So I got into the Glass Cannon stuff, and they're now 300 episodes in.
Right.
They've got like tons of live shows during the quarantine, during the lockdown. What they've been doing is a weekly 4-hour show where they try out different games. So you had them playing Call of Cthulhu, you've had them playing Delta Green, you've had them playing the Star Wars one, which I haven't listened to because Star Wars. God, I get enough of Star Wars just by existing. I don't really want any more. And these guys, this is their job. There's 8 of them, and this is their full-time job, is now just creating content based around RPGs.
Well,
you go back 10, 12 years, you couldn't do that.
No, the fact that you can do that technology and culture has evolved to the point where in the midst of a lockdown where you can't even get together, you can actually do that successfully is incredible. Absolutely incredible. And as Tom said, I imagine because of the isolation and the adversity of the current circumstances, I imagine more people will be getting into that sort of thing.
Absolutely. I really, really wish I had the time to run some stuff during this entire experience, because I would love to have gone onto Skype and just ran like a stupid, I don't know, I'd probably run a Ravencroft game because I love Ravencroft.
Who doesn't love Ravencroft? It's great fun. But speaking of, Tom, we have got to pick up our D&D game at some point.
It would be absolutely wonderful. I've been working on your challenge to do some good Call of Cthulhu, and so I've worked out an introductory Cthulhu scenario for non-Cthulhu players, and it's called "I Would Have Got Away with It If It Wasn't for You Kids, your meddling kids, and your dog." So we're going to take Cthulhu, and to make it more accessible, we're going to put it into the Scooby-Doo kind of genre. But, I'm thinking about fictional apocalypses a lot over the last 90 odd days. I mean,
can't imagine what inspired that, Tom.
Well, I worked out that of all the apocalypses we can and all of the grimdarking, actually the worst conceivable universe for us right now is the Scooby-Doo universe, because Scooby-Doo universe in 1969, it all takes place in abandoned fun fairs and hotels and seaside resorts. It's very clear that this is a couple of years on after a major societal economic collapse.
Actually, now that you mention it, it makes enormous sense, especially if you're using like the original Scooby-Doo shows as the format, because in the original Scooby-Doo shows, of course, all of the bad guys are like evil industrialists, aren't they? They're sort of people who have lost all their money, yeah?
Yeah, they're people who, I think 3 of them are lawyers, 2 of them have got PhDs, several of them are engineers. They're people who, at normal circumstances, are actually very stable careers. Right. So something has gone catastrophically wrong, that they're lurking in the ruins of fun fairs, trying to shake down passers-by for change. So it's the worst of all possible worlds.
So the running theory is that the 1960s, Scooby-Doo, Where Are You?, the original show, is actually not set in the 1960s. It's actually set at some point in the far future, when everything is broken down as a result of economic collapse and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and this is fantastic because it's the most absolute fertile grounds for fiction.
Right. I love it.
Well, I don't think humans do very well about creating imaginary worlds where things are going absolutely swimmingly. I mean, the history of British comics, for example, is 2000 AD really did fantastically well. And I love them because they're actually very local to where I live. Mm-hmm. They did amazingly well in the 1980s. And the real the boom of the underground and then the mainstream British comic industry was to do with really bad economic conditions.
I mean, a lot of these things arose from trying to satirize Thatcher, didn't it? The sort of Thatcherism and Reaganism and whatnot. Judge Dredd is certainly a direct response to that. And ironically, as a result of that influence, so is a lot of 40K.
Yeah, and to run with that, actually, I mean, the original creators of Judge Dredd, there was a really big creative struggle early on in Judge Dredd's print run. Is Judge Dredd just a straight-laced portrayal of authoritarianism in a dystopia, or is it satirizing? And there was nobody ever really came down one side or another. But I certainly noticed with Games Workshop that in the beginning, in the 80s, their apocalyptic satire was laced with humor and subversion. I mean, one of the early heavy metal winners I remember from the 1980s in White Dwarf was of a Space Marine biker breaking down and calling the AA.
I love it. I must have been too young because I didn't really get into it until a little bit later than that. But I must have missed that one. But I would have loved to have seen that. But you're absolutely right. And, just by the nature, I mean, Adam and I have discussed this before, but just because of the extremity of that universe and of the cultures that it paints is enough to demonstrate its satirical nature, yeah?
Absolutely.
The same is true of Judge Dredd. I mean, as we've said before, the only way they could even make Judge Dredd seem less of a jackbooted fascist is by introducing an antagonist who regards all of life as a crime.
Or sticking Sylvester Stallone into the role of him.
Let's not talk about that. Let's not ever talk about that again. Let's deny that. Let us put up a wall of denialism that ever existed, and that
I agree.
Yeah.
Is that in the same way that we have all agreed that there's only 3 Alien films, 2 Terminator films, and 2 Predator films?
Yeah.
I agree. There are only 3 Indiana Jones films as well.
Yeah. Seems fair to me. Seems absolutely. There's only one thing. Unless you count the thing from outer space, which is slightly different thing. But yes, it's. But I mean, Adam and I have discussed this. There is a problem, isn't there, in 40K culture that has been flagged up by recent events, which is there are sort of subcultures who do believe that, or at least proclaim to believe that the Imperium is somehow a good place or something that's that's aspirational somehow.
Seeing the entire idea of the Imperium being the good guys at the setting,
right,
which is a concerning idea because it means you've missed the point.
You've missed the point profoundly, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the main flaw in the Imperium is it can only exist by keeping everything in a constant state of war. Otherwise, it would just collapse on the inside, and so it's a bad example of how to order society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's also, it will die eventually. It's so fragile, especially when you consider all of the other external pressures that are acting on it, and internal as well. When you've got things like cultists, you've got civil strife, and the fact that it's so far flung. What's going to ultimately end the Imperium? It's actually not going to be any of the alien races. It's not going to be chaos. It's going to be administration and bureaucracy that ends the Imperium.
Weirdly enough, I was thinking about this the other day because I have tendencies to have these thoughts. And it was, what do you need to go through in order to get paper for somebody to write something down in the Imperium?
That's a short story in itself, isn't it?
Because it was a part in Manflayer that really just got my brain ticking over, and I started thinking about it.
The latest Fabius Bile book, yeah?
Which, by the way, go and read because it's amazing.
Really good, yeah.
Fabius outdoes himself more than once, and I feel sorry for the man.
Tom, have you read any of the recent Fabius Bile books from the Black Library?
I have them on my shelf, but haven't read them yet. But
honestly,
actually, I think Fabius Bile is a fantastic character, and it's really wonderful to see that the spider stuff is based on him.
So you've seen the new miniature, yeah?
Wonderful.
Isn't it good? Isn't it good? It was so exciting. It's so exciting. And, the War of the Spider was released this weekend. I am eagerly anticipating its arrival in the post, I can tell you. Alongside Fabius himself, of course.
Oh, yes.
Or Fabulous Bill, as we all call him.
Good old Fabulous Bill.
Fabulous Bill.
Yeah, the thought process I had, it ended up, I realised that, first of all, you need to find a very forested world. And then you have to start shipping tons and tons and tons of lumber off that world onto another world, which will then pulp down that lumber into paper. And then you have to move that paper from that world to another world to be distributed from a distribution world. And then that distribution world will take the paper to the world it needs to be in order to get it to your table for you to write on. The amount of time and effort involved on getting paper onto your table is insane.
Well, what I like about the background, certainly when you read about the nature of the Imperium in the Black Library novels, is a lot of the writers take this on board and they actually run with it. So there are stories in like the short story collections and whatnot of, say, like Scribes on Terra. At the very heart of it, which is just pure administration. It's just like queues forever. There are stories totally satirical of entire generations of scribes who spend their entire lives queuing to see a particular administrator or whatever. And the current incumbents of the queues, who are sort of like several generations down from those who originally joined the queue, have no idea why they originally joined. It's become mythologized, so it's now their purpose in being. And the administrator they're going to see is probably long dead and will have no idea what they're talking about. Yeah? It's so brilliant. I love that stuff.
That is amazing. That's almost my experience of working for the Church of England.
Yes, inside gossip on the Church of England. You hear it on the Fluffenhammer first, ladies and gentlemen.
Inside gossip, the queues go for days.
Isn't the queues go for days?
Out of interest, Tom, what armies do you actually play?
I grew up as a Goblin player because my dad was a Goblin player. I mean, he actually had a copy of White Dwarf #1. He had a White Dwarf t-shirt back in the days when it wasn't okay to be a geek. It wasn't okay to be a nerd, but I grew up painting, which is absolutely fantastic. I've had a wonderful dwarf army. When my wife and I got married, one of the first things we did for the first year of our lives, we painted a fantasy dwarf army while watching the X-Files on VHS from beginning to end. That was a wonderful time.
That's the best thing I've ever heard. Sorry.
She was absolutely brilliant. I was gutted. Despite my years of training, she picked up a brush and was immediately better than I was.
Right. Yeah, it's your thing, isn't it, Adam? From when you see like kids who are like 12 and they're painting sort of heavy metal standard or Golden Demon standard, and it's like, wow.
And I'm sitting here half blind and ancient and going, I just crumble to dust. I hate you.
I got into Dark Angels because Deathwing and the experience of playing Space Hulk, because that was incredibly informational on me. And I got into Thousand Suns. Well, it was a really interesting story. I was in Scotland with a friend of mine in the middle of Scottish summer, and because I love Scotland, wonderful place, wonderful people, it was chucking it down all days bar one. Mm-hmm. We were inside, and what we had his Thousand Sun army to paint. And this was old Thousand Suns. It was like painting chunks of Toblerone, because all the square on top, square on the shoulders, down to, and the paint that we had, it was remarkable. It wasn't Games Workshop, and it separated while you're painting into various golds and greens, and it actually looked beautiful. And that really stuck with me. So talking to George over the last few years, he very lavishly and kindly bought me the Army Starter set for Thousand Suns, and it's wonderful to go back to them.
Oh my God! It is one of. Don't you just love these starter sets? I mean, I know we effuse a lot about Games Workshop on this podcast, but it's all sincere. You know, we're not being paid or anything.
Although Games Workshop want to pay us,
if they would like to, that would be wonderful.
I'll sell out. I don't care.
Those starter sets are. I must admit, Tom, I bought two because I bought one for myself as well, obviously. They are fantastic, aren't they?
Absolutely fantastic. It's the detail and the simple interchangeability. Because I remember when plastic starter sets in the 1980s, I remember the Wood Elf Bowman.
Oh my God.
Standing sideways doing, I think it was the dance that TerraVision did in the music video for Tequila in 1997. They're kind of pointing off into the background while vaguely wiggling. And that was a starter plastic army set. And then to forward nearly 40 years, and that's embarrassing, to something which is multi-part bespoke and of almost infinite recyclability is amazing. Absolutely.
And to do that for something like the Thousand Suns as well, you know, which are traditionally quite uniform for a chaos unit, are actually quite uniform because they are all just the rubrique. It's quite incredible, isn't it?
It speaks of a real advancement in technology. I had a guy around for a barbecue last night who runs a kind of a computer-aided printing company, and they cut stuff. He made Professor Xavier's tombstone from the X-Men movies that you see on screen. Lovely guy, Chris, quite local. And just the way that manufacturing has come on in the last few decades has been astonishing. Games Workshop's been at the forefront of that. I don't know if you remember the Finecast debacle when you could go to Games Workshop and buy a fist leaning out of a plastic block because it didn't quite work that time. They've played since then.
Yeah, I've had some very bad experience. I think all of us, everyone listening to this, has probably had some very bad experiences with Finecast.
Absolutely. But to be fair, I've also had some really good experiences with Finecast.
Yeah.
I got the Mordheim Witch Hunter. Because I love that mini. And I've never able to find it in lead for a decent amount. And then it came up as a thing on eBay, Finecast, for about £6. I thought, yep, I'll have that. I got it, and it is the crispest, sharpest, nicest model.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's come out beautifully. But that's, you compare that to, as you say, the pair of arms sticking out of a Lego cube.
Yeah. I've always had issues with just the quality of the material, because I remember I got the limited edition Homunculi that came out with the, I want to say 5th edition Dark Elder Codex, the one that's sort of standing up on it. It's got like a sort of exposed spine coming out of its back, and it's whipping around like a tail, and it's elevated up on that spine, and I glued that son of a bitch to that base a million times, and that tail just could not suspend it in the Finecast. It just could not do it. I had to give up with it in the end. I had to sort of surrender with that one, unfortunately. I mean, now they've actually more or less phased Finecast out, haven't they? Am I right in that?
Yeah, pretty much.
It's more or less all plastic now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they still have Finecast for certain things, but what gets released now under the name Finecast is heads and tails above what it used to be.
Yeah.
What have I got? I've got a Finecast. I've got the Witch Hunter. I've got a Skarsnik and Gobbler. The second one. That's Finecast. I've got, what else have I got? One sec. They do an Orc Shaman. I've got some others as well. I'm not going to bore you all by sitting here and just looking around the collection. But all of these later ones, so much better. I
think a lot of like the Drukhari now, the Dark Elder as they were, a lot of the Drukhari are Finecast exclusive.
Yeah.
Like the racks, I believe, you can't buy a plastic boxed set of the racks, which is kind of a shame. Or indeed the Grotesques, you've got to get them through Finecast.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there. I mean, you look at stuff that Forge World's pulling out now with their resin, and it is really, really crisp and lovely stuff. It's why when we were at Warhammer World last year, I had to walk through parts of the store with my eyes closed, holding on to Taz because,
Well,
so nice.
This is another problem with the way, just the sheer quality of stuff that's being released at the moment. It's actually come to the point whereby I know what I've got to do is really focus down.
Yeah.
Really focus down, because I just don't have the money or the time to do everything I would love to do. Homunculus Covens, Thousand Sons, Beast Men, Slaves to Darkness, all of this stuff is just brilliant. It's just wonderful. On top of that, Drukhari, the Eldari, the new Necrons, for God's sake. Tom, have you seen the new Necrons?
New Necrons are absolutely fantastic. I think there's going to be a great children's story come out called I Want My Flesh Back.
And I will write it. It sounds up my alley.
They are terrific, absolutely fantastic, and for an army that I think possibly suffered the heaviest under Matt Ward, my memory is,
I said the Tyranids got a little bit worse, but the Necrons got seriously screwed. They got warded.
Yeah, they did, didn't they? They did, and one of those armies as well that just tends to get given short shrift traditionally.
Did you see the picture that was doing the rounds last night that might be the Silent King?
No, I did not.
You keep chatting, ladies and gentlemen, and I shall find this.
Yeah, because Tom, like the new background of the Necrons, where they are not the slaves of the Catan anymore. The Catan are their slaves, basically.
That gives a lot more narrative play scope, actually. I think that's incredibly positive.
Yeah,
it gives them a future as well as a past.
Absolutely. It kind of it makes them much more interesting, doesn't it? It makes them much more individual and threatening. I mean, these entities have enslaved gods, literal gods, via their technology, yeah? So in the background, there's always been this character called Zarek, who is the Silent King, and he was the ruler of the Necron Empire during the period when they became the Necrons as we now know them, when biotransference occurred. Oh my God!
Ooh,
Hello. That's a conversion.
is it a conversion?
That is definitely a conversion, because those are the Mauler Fiend tendrils from Chaos. Those are definitely the Mauler Fiend tendrils. Although there is, the photograph that Games Workshop themselves released of all of the up and coming Necron miniatures. Top right hand corner, you can see Zarek.
Yeah.
It's very blurry, it's very indistinct, but he's definitely there. But yeah, Zarek is he is the one who oversaw the war against the Catan. So this guy is a big deal. This guy is forget Abaddon the Despoiler. This guy is bad news. And he's come back apparently in the new... He's never had a miniature. He's always been conspicuous by his absence. He's only ever been in the background and has been absent for millennia, absolute millennia. But in the new edition of 40k and in the new Necron Codex, they brought him back.
I mean, fluff-wise, he would predate the Chaos gods, and therefore he would be the sentient being in the universe.
Yep. That's about the size of it, it seems. Yeah, I mean...
It's actually even weirder than that. If you think about it, the only race that existed when he was around were the Eldar.
Yeah.
Eldari. Because you had the Corks, which became the Orcs.
Yeah.
But every other race that exists now hadn't evolved yet.
Hadn't even evolved yet, yeah. I mean, there may have not even have been life on Earth at that point.
Nope, there wasn't.
So... It's this guy has seen everything. Maybe he has seen everything, Maybe he's actually watched the evolution of the universe from afar, all the wars, the development of the Emperor, the Great Crusade, the Horus Heresy, the fall of the Eldari, all of that stuff.
It's fascinating, isn't it, to think, what does the universe look like to somebody who has that kind of scope, that kind of focus?
I mean, the way they've done the miniature, you can't really see much because it's kind of blurry and out of the way, but you can see that Zarek himself is kind of unassuming. He's not massive. He's not like a giant or anything. He's actually quite a small figure, but is on this enormous machine, just this gigantic Necron machine that's powered by a captured Catan. You can see the Catan sort of suspended in it and sort of captured in this circle of machinery. And there are these sort of extraneous pillars that move with it. It looks incredible. And I mean, absolutely incredible. It looks like what they're doing for the character models, they're going AOS. They're going for the big set pieces.
Yeah.
And I'm so into that.
It's here's a question for you.
Yes.
For you both. So we know that 9th edition is the edition of the Xenos. That's kind of been all but confirmed at this point.
Yep.
So we know that Chaos has taken a bit of a back seat whilst the Xenos races get a focus. Do you think that next year we're going to see a change up in the AOS lineup as well?
Oh, no, that's interesting.
Because Star Wars is about 3 years or 2 years old, 3 years old at this point.
Yeah, and the Chaos stuff, the new Chaos stuff is kind of running down now, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Because they've done all the re-releases. They can't really do much else now with the Chaos Rangers, to be honest. It's kind of full now. Yeah. So maybe we'll start seeing more like the Lumineth, more like whatever the elves that come from Ulgu are called, the Shadow Elves. And maybe some new stuff, maybe some new races. It's introduced something a bit different.
Mm-hmm. I hope so. I very much hope so. Because AOS was doing so well, and it's kind of gone quiet whilst the Lumineth have been sitting in the background.
Well, I mean, the thing is, it's gonna slip into the background whilst 9th Ed 40k is building up.
Of course. I
mean, all the focus at the moment is going to be on 9th Ed, and I've got to say, most of what I've seen, I like.
Yep.
I think the changes they've introduced are really good. For the most part, I know some of them have been controversial, and some of them have sort of split the fan base. But I think, the big one was the change to Overwatch.
Yeah.
So, Overwatch in 8th Ed was abused by certain armies, let's put it that way. It was
Absolutely,
massively
it was.
abused. But now you have to think about it. You really have to think about it, because you can't just use it every time a unit charges into another unit. You've got to think about, do I spend the command point to do it?
Mm-hmm.
And I like that. I kind of like that. And I imagine, I mean, they did point out that though certain units will just be able to use it anyway, if that's part of their background and part of how they work, they'll just be able to use it. So I'm imagining the Tau, for example, who rely on Overwatch, will be able to use it.
Yeah, the way I understand it is that the Tower's going to have like a fire at will rule, which allows them to keep the Overwatch in place without...
certain other units, certain other races have to spend the command point on it.
Yeah.
And I kind of like that. I've got to say, I kind of like it. I mean, Tom, have you actually like played a game at all, or seen, or watched some of the YouTube videos where people play games of 40k?
Well, no, because I've been getting my kicks with Warcry over the...
Oh, yes!
Astonishing, absolutely astonishing. In terms, I've got Kill Team,
which is also very good.
It's fantastic, and actually, I have to say, mechanically, I'm seeing a lot of things Games Workshop are learning from doing their skirmish level games. They're reapplying it back to their main systems, and that is incredibly smart. Because things like Warcry are really good test beds for new ideas, and really getting the kinks out of stuff. But actually bring it back. Certainly, I'm excited by what Age of Sigmar is going to begin to look like because of what they're learning from Warcry. And just 9th edition when it comes out.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's so clear that what they've done is they've taken games like Kill Team, like Blackstone Fortress, and they've looked at the mechanics of the way things work, what people are interested in with regards to the new miniatures they've released for those systems, and they're feeding those lessons back into the main game systems. So one of the things they've clearly done with 9th Ed is they've made it way more expansive in terms of scale. So like in AOS, you can now have these tiny little games that are maybe just a squad aside, and that works. It's fine. Or, if you want, you can have these insane apocalypse scale armies, and that works too.
I mean, that's really interesting, because I was actually, the last time I was worried about the health of Games Workshop, it was when War Machines and Hordes was doing incredibly well, because they got skirmish right when Games Workshop was still pumping up the points values, as it were. This is a very, in terms of me, in terms of my limited budget and finite time, it's good. In terms of the household dynamics and peace, I'm a little bit worried, because if we are going all Xenos races, my wife loves the Tau, and my daughter not only has declared love for Dark Elves, she's also really rather likes Tyranids as well. So this is going to be particularly difficult for me.
Superb.
There's a race that desperately needs to get a good look.
In 9th Ed,
the Tyranids, I mean, they should be absolutely terrifying, and they're just not.
Part of the problem the Tyranids have had for a while is it's not a problem, but it's something that kind of demonstrates how little attention they've had for a while, which is the Gene Stealer cults.
Yeah.
The reintroduction of the Gene Stealer cults into 40k proved so successful, and I think it demonstrated what a lot of people want, what players want from their more Xenos-style armies, which is something that has more of an identifiable character. And as a result, the Tyranids have kind of been given short shrift. They've been sort of left out in the cold, as it were.
I can see why, because what they've been doing, and they've been doing very well, is leaving narrative hooks for you to build your armies up.
Yeah.
The Gene Stealer cult is amazing for that, because you can just go, right, Gene Stealer cult, what world is it on?
Yeah.
And go from there. Or you've got stuff like the Bladed Cog. You've got all these different ideas. The Sons of the Four-Armed Emperor.
Yeah.
The Oryx are the same. The Oryx, sorry. Bad Adam. Naughty Adam. The Orcs in 40k are the same. You've got all these different areas now that they've kind of brought back the different clans a bit more. I think they should lean into that a lot more than they have, but that's just me. Necrons, look at what they're doing with the Necrons. You've got tons of stuff there. Well, what do you do for the Tyranids to create narrative hooks?
It's difficult. I mean, they tried very hard with the 8th Ed Codex. They introduced a lot of divergent hive fleets, for example, that we've never seen before. And they also explained how some of the bigger hive fleets, like Leviathan, after they've invaded like the main galactic plane, they've splintered into various smaller hive fleets. So you're actually getting divergence of Leviathan and divergence of Behemoth that all do different things. They've all got slightly different coloration. situations and all slightly different modus operandi. And that's cool. That's fun. You can sort of do it that way. But, for my money, what they need to do with the Tyranids, they need to go down a much more HR Giga route. They need to make them much more parasitic, make them much more unpleasant and gribbly and less clean.
Yeah, I agree with the less clean part.
I want them to be a bit, to feel properly alien and unpleasant, to have like seepages and, to be gross and gribbly and unpleasant.
One of the things. Sorry, carry on.
No, I was going to say that's really interesting because that kind of takes it back to the origin. Because my first experience of meeting Gene Stealers is as the adversary in Space Hulk, and of course they always won, but they were very obviously at that point Games Workshop's attempt to use Giga's alien without getting their rear end suit, because Giga was notoriously litigious actually about the use of his IP. He tried to sue the production designers of Alien 3 for all of the work that he started but other artists finished on the Dogburst. And so I think Games Workshop were kind of very scared about going back to those kind of routes for a long time. And I think a lot of kind of the tyranniding up and the cleaning up of Tyranids was to avoid that kind of fate. But actually, honestly, at this point, they can go back and make them, to use your language, as gribbly as possible would be fantastic.
I really, for me, it's that horror element. It's that essential horror element with the Tyranids. And it's captured, if you look at the artwork in a lot of the codices, then it captures it really well. You really do want to get with the Tyranids this sense of an unidentifiable swarm. So you don't see individual entities apart from obviously the big, massive hulking creatures. You just see limbs and mouths and eyes, and it's just terrifying, yeah? They should be frightening when you put them down on the tabletop.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's how do you do it, though? Because no matter what you do, the moment you see something on a regular basis, it becomes less terrifying. It's why the Tyranids, I think, lost a lot of their gravity.
Right.
Especially after the Matt Ward Codex.
People really didn't like Matt Ward, did they? They really didn't like him.
Kept getting work is beyond me. He's good. God in heaven. He just. Oh, if I ever wanted to kick somebody in the face I've never met.
I will say, I mean, there is some stuff in some of the codices that he wrote that is really stupid. I mean, that
Ultramarine Codex.
The whole thing about, was it Kaldor Drago, who inscribed his name on Mortarion's heart?
Oh.
It's so silly. It's so silly. I mean, first of all, Mortarion's a demon, so how do you even do that?
Oh, that's not even the beginnings of what he did with Drago.
Right.
Drago wandered off into the warp and spent the next millennia or so just kicking ass.
So I understand.
And then came back out and went, right, I'm just going to lead you, Grey Knights, now let's go.
Yeah, that's silly. That is silly. I mean, I don't care if you are a Grey Knight. The warp will drive you mad.
Yeah,
if you are in the warp, you are going to go mad, and you are going to end up as some heaving, pulsating mass of pseudopods and eyes and mouths and whatever.
Oh, we can only hope.
Yeah, right.
That's my ambition in life.
And I know exactly what you mean, Adam, when you say that Ultramarine Codex.
Oh, that Ultramarine Codex. Honestly, Is
that the one where he basically tried to point out that all of the other Space Marine legions are just jealous of the Ultramarines and want to be them?
Oh, yeah. So, right. A little bit of context here. I try my very best to be positive about things because it's very easy for me to drop into a negative state of mind. Mm-hmm. I find negativity to be very unproductive. You know, saying that something is just crap doesn't help the conversation. It doesn't do anything, right? If you can back it up with reasons and you can have a discussion, then it's worth doing. Yeah. However, there is always exceptions to the rule. And in this case, Matt Ward's work on the Ultramarine Codex is something that should have been fired into the sun at the earliest opportunity. It is one of the worst bits. Not only are the rule sets utterly ridiculous, and they are, because it means that the Ultramarines are just some goddamn blue-ridden steamroller that just attacks and destroys everything in their path, because Ward loved his Ultramarines so much, he managed to make sure that they would never lose.
Right.
Ever. You could not win against Ultramarines. It was insane. But not only that, he decided to make the fiction, the fluff, something that is so absolutely unrealistic that it goes from being ridiculous right through to bullshit, back to ridiculous, back to bullshit, and creates some kind of spinning nexus that does not end. It is ridiculous. Even the chapter headings are something that you wouldn't want to wipe your ass with. It is a collection of the worst bits of ideas that a 7-year-old dribbling into his sandwiches during break time would have daydreamed up. It is stupid. Stupid.
Well, the fact that you remember it as an Ultramarine Codex says it all, really, because it wasn't an Ultramarine Codex, it was a Space Marine Codex.
Yeah, exactly. That's the problem, and I refuse to give it the name for a Space Marine Codex because it is just a dribbling love letter to what Matt Ward thought the Ultramarines were. Not to what they are, or what they were at the time, or even anything to do with their history. It was what he thought they were, or what he thought they should be. It was his mindset on why they're the best.
It's a shame,
in order
really.
to get it to fit, he had to shave bits off other people's armies to get it to fit into his mindset. And I hate it. I absolutely hate it. It drives me up the wall. It's just how bad it was.
You certainly weren't alone. I mean, most Space Marine players really disliked that codex. I mean, because for the reasons you cited, largely because, you know, if you were a White Scars player, for example, or an Imperial Fists player, you really didn't get much of a look in.
Well, even if you're an Ultramarines player, people didn't like it.
Yeah, because
you removed any form of tactics out of the game.
Right.
You turned up and won.
Yeah, it is problematic, and it's a shame because the Ultramarines have really become something different in recent years. They've really evolved and become a really interesting army in terms of their background.
Yeah,
especially
absolutely.
with I mean, Tom, have you seen Guilliman?
Oh, he's absolutely fantastic. If I could just pick up on just something that Adam said first, is that I think Adam actually has been quite mild about Matt Ward. I spent some time on I hate to put these two words together, but if I said that there were a group of people building a hate cathedral, that would very much be the opinion of 4chan about Matt Ward.
Yeah.
Oh,
I can imagine. I can well imagine. I mean, he doesn't. Does he still do work for Games Workshop?
He got rehired a few years ago, so this will continue. He left the company about 2014 to go and actually write some really horribly well-respected novels, which are now being turned into a TV show.
Right, okay.
And now I think he's been rehired a couple of years ago and he's now doing stuff. So yeah.
Right, okay.
And
interesting.
to give the man his due, the stuff that he does now is heads and tails above what he used to do.
Yeah, so he's evolved a bit, yeah.
I think a lot of it is literally down to experience. I think the man was dropped in on the deep end.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he floundered a lot, and the reason that the stuff that he did was so bad is because he didn't know really what he was doing, and he didn't have the direction that he should have been given.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm being sensible here, and I'm getting off my soapbox. However, that Tyranid Codex, right?
Yeah.
Now, this is where I really draw the line, because for every nice thing I say about Matt Ward, like I just done there, I now need to go on another rant, because what you do, right? Just stick with me on this one. What we do is we take an alien race whose entire basis is to constantly adapt and evolve, sometimes over the space of a couple of hours, in order to respond to a direct threat in front of it. Yeah? Mm-hmm. Yeah? Yeah? Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure every Tyranid army looks exactly the goddamn same.
Yeah. That's also on the heels, of course, of a codex that allows for the exact opposite of that.
Yeah, it was insanity. But I do think that the guy was just, I think, for want of a better term, I think he was just inexperienced. I think he was given too big a project for him to successfully manage to complete.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's
I mean, you have to bear in mind, like, the culture of Games Workshop at that time was just about selling the latest thing, wasn't it? It was just selling the biggest kits and the most of the latest thing. So you did have that awful situation where there was enormous discrepancy between every individual codex.
Yeah.
There was really, each one was almost like an experiment in and of itself, and referred to the wider rules in its own way rather than there being any kind of uniformity. So at the same time as you have that Space Marine Codex running around, which is hideously overpowered and abusable, you also have the 4th Ed Chaos Space Marine Codex running around, which is one of the worst products Games Workshop have ever put out.
Absolutely it is.
I mean...
I know people who stopped playing as Tyranid players and also Chaos Space Marine players, and they just put down their paintbrush and walked away and never came back because of experience using those codecs.
Yeah, same.
Yeah,
that was pretty
absolutely.
much me, to be honest, Tom. After the fourth ed codex came out, it was very difficult to get engaged outside of the background. I became more someone who just read the books and just bought the codices for the background and nothing else, you know. It wasn't until really very recently, really it was what inspired the creation of the Fluffenhammer, to be honest. It was when Games Workshop really turned a corner and started really picking it up again. And for me, I mean, we've discussed this many times on the show, but for me, what got me back in was the new Thousand Sons. It was when Magnus came back.
Yeah.
And I assume you've seen
that
him.
well.
You've seen him, Tom. You've seen Magnus the Red.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you guys as more experienced geeks and my elders in this field is, are we going to see more Primarchs coming back?
Absolutely.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt. You know, they keep dropping hints about them. In the you've seen these Psychic Awakening books, Tom. You know, the books that they're introducing into 40k that kind of update both the armies and the background incrementally and move the setting on.
There are hints for him, aren't there, in that? So
loads, absolutely loads. The one that they're hinting at strongest is Fulgrim.
Yeah.
There are, in almost every Psychic Awakening book, there has been a reference to him. There's been a quote from him. You know, there's been a tiny eensy-weensy suggestion of what he's doing on the galactic scale and what the Emperor's Children are doing. So my guess is if as and when we do see some chaos in 9th Ed, there's a few things they're definitely going to introduce. The Dark Mechanicum. That is an absolute. That they are definitely building up to a Dark Mechanicum release. Traitor Guard is another one that's been mooted. A lot of the really the seasoned rumor mongers, the ones who are almost have like 100% reliability rating, they're all saying Traitor Guard are on the cards. They are going to be like one of the next Chaos armies that are launched. And I would guess the Emperor's Children at some point. There will be an Emperor's Children codex in the same vein as the Thousand Sons and the Death Guard, alongside Fulgrim and a new Lucius the Eternal.
One of the things that really just drives my boat, I can't think of a better way of saying that. Sorry, that kind of fell out my mouth. One of the things that really gets me is the rumor mill of that Traitor Guard are going to have the Imperial Baseman.
Yeah, so I understand.
And that alone is just like 11-year-old me being held by a big cuddly arm, just going, there we go. There we go.
Well, they teased it. They teased it, didn't they? Because you can get a Beastman for Necromunda, can't you?
Yeah, and of course the ones from Blackstone Fortress have 40k rules as well.
Yes, of course they do. I forgot about them. I totally
never forget,
forgot about that.
Blackstone Fortress is where they try out new ideas to see how people react.
Well, you can see it there, can't you? If you look at the Chaos miniatures that have been released for Blackstone Fortress, you get those weird those electro cultists who are clearly Dark Mechanicum.
Oh, yeah.
Clearly Dark Mechanicum. And then you get the Traitor Guard that are not Chaos cultists. They are more seasoned than that. They seem to be like ex-commissars and ex-sergeants and captains who have broken away from the Imperium and become renegades and Chaos champions alongside Beastmen and whatnot. So my guess is that's what's coming. That's what's going to be down the pipeline. An entire range of that. And I have a funny feeling that might be the predominant flavour of Chaos in 9th Ed.
I think you're probably right there.
It wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me at all.
It'd be nice to get some ground view armies going again. I mean, the Astra Militarum, saying that hurts my throat.
The Astra Militarium, yeah.
Yeah, the Imperial Guard. They are a range that desperately needs looked at. So if you can get an Imperial Guard that could either be done as loyalist or as traitor,
that'd be good.
Yeah, that's actually a really good way of doing it.
That'd be good fun.
I think that'd be a nice 2-in-1 box there. To go back to something earlier on, Tom, you were talking about Warcry. And nobody else plays Warcry, so I'm all excited and want to have a conversation about Warcry with you because I adore Warcry and I have too many Warcry bands. So what do you play in Warcry?
I play whatever I'm given by my friend who has a far higher modelling budget than I do. And I found it to be fantastic as a gentle way back into the tabletop hobby. I found it fast-paced. I can drive over to when we were allowed to do these things, drive over to my friend's house 20 minutes away, have 2 games, and go home that very evening before my children presume I'm legally dead. So actually, it's been absolutely brilliant. I love the chaosy-ness of it, and actually it's wonderful to explore different chaos factions. I think some of the miniatures that come out with it have been absolutely first class, and the idea of a measured, affordable product. I spent, I think, a lot of the early 2000s bewailing the fact that Games Workshop no longer released games, harking back, looking at Space Crusade, Hero Quest, and similar kind of enterprises. Actually, Games Workshop have really got their act together. And I think Warcry is a complete thing in and of itself. It's not meant to be a taster to say, and now buy your bigger army. It's actually, it's a fantastic product, great to play, but unfortunately, limited budget, or I play what's put in front of me.
Yeah. What, out of what you've played, what's kind of stood out?
Right, now you're really pushing me, because I am desperately, I've loved the Cypher Lords personally, in terms of, just for the look and how they play have been fantastic. But like any small, quick army, it's very easy to be cut down in a single turn. Although all, credit to the Warcry system, it's very hard to be completely lost. And all games I've played have gone down to the wire to the last of 3 turns, one way or another. The Cypher Lords have been absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
Spire Tyrants have just been fun, because if you imagine Ridley Scott's Gladiator just with a bit of a darker twist on that.
Oh, now you've said that, I now know what I have to shout it whenever I play the Spire Tyrants. Are you not entertained?
I think the only people I've had any particular problems with have been the Night Haunts, just for the simple ease of knocking over with my large, clumsy fist, because they are so terribly, terribly delicate.
Yeah. Brilliant.
My wife plays Iron Golems, or as she actually says, the 1974 Butland staff. Because for some reason she's decided they all work for a Butlins that was swept away by the sea, and they are now.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally get that redcoats thing. I went to Butlins on holiday in the mid '80s, and I swear to goodness, I saw some of those guys there. Yeah.
And whenever so I built an AOS code Battletome for it using the Iron Golems, and it's become the Butlins blood shirts, and they just have all these animals that they go around just from stealing from zoos. There's an entire narrative to them now. It's ridiculous. But anyhow, so she plays Iron Golems, and so far I have managed to win 1 out of 6 games. She doesn't win when we played AOS. She doesn't win when we play 40k. But in Warcry, she just clicks straight into it and she wipes the floor with me. It is ridiculous. So
I think that's absolutely fantastic, and I think the couple who games together stays together. So I absolutely, kudos on some good home life modelling there.
We haven't done it for a while because we've really a 5-month-old now. But,
of course.
Yeah, I mean, I've got Talisman and stuff that we played quite a lot of, and we had a very drunken night of playing Hero Quest, and we went through the only reason we stopped playing it is because neither of us could see anymore. So.
Wouldn't you just love them to re-release Hero Quest with a few nips and tucks, though? Just the same game system, the same board and whatnot. Just re-release it. It would be so much fun.
Yeah, I mean, there's been ways and means that people have tried to do it. Do you know the Hero Quest 25th anniversary story?
No.
Right, this is real interesting. I'm not going to try and explain the entire tale because A, we don't have 8 hours, and B, I don't think I could do it justice. But basically, a company called GameZone said they got the license for Hero Quest and started releasing pictures of stuff they'd done, and they were close to release.
Yeah.
Until MB Games, which is now owned by Hasbro, turned around and went, "Excuse me, what?
Oh.
You don't have the license." And Games Workshop turned around and went, "Excuse me, what? You don't have a license." Right, so they'd lied from start to finish. Which is a shame because the miniatures were gorgeous. It looked amazing.
Yeah, there's two companies you don't want to get litigious with over their copyright.
But it actually got worse because the company GameZone, they took a lot of pre-order money, which people haven't had back. It got bad. I would recommend going and looking at it because, as I say, I can't do it justice.
That does sound... It's the kind of thing that excites my prurient interest, I've got to say.
It's one of those ones I've wanted to do a video scaling the history of it for quite some time. But every time I think I've got everything together, I find more, and I just need to go and research that, and then life happens and I can't get back to it, and then I get back to it and find something else, and then have to research that because I want to make sure that I'm doing it justice and giving the people who were thrown under the bus about it some respect, because
of course,
the last thing you want to do is be pointing and laughing at people. It's not what you want to be doing at all. It has to be done sensibly. But yeah, I've probably got enough to do maybe a 45-minute documentary on the thing at this point in time. It's ridiculous.
Wow. I mean, it's a shame really that it didn't come off, but I mean, Games Workshop is now in a state where they could do that culturally, you know, and it would be very successful.
The problem is that MB Games, as I say, Hasbro, they still own a big chunk of the rights to that and Space Crusade, and they ain't giving it up.
No,
I don't know why.
That's problematic.
Yeah, they've done nothing with it.
Such a shame.
What, Advanced Quest in 1994?
Yeah.
You know,
so the stuff that introduced a lot of us to the Games Workshop hobby.
Yeah, I don't see why they can't do a re-release of it.
Yeah.
Like a budget re-release where you get the original game, then you get, I don't know, Keller's Keep and Return of the Witch Lord in one pack, then...
God, it'd sell.
Yeah.
It'd sell.
It would absolutely sell. Honestly, you do that for, I don't know, 20 quid, 25 quid for the box set, do the expansions for 15, sell them through B&M, you know, get a deal in place with B&M or with like Game, you know, do it that way, you know, you'd make a fortune. It would sell like slobber knockers because people desperately want it.
Well, I mean, it's just got that massive nostalgia factor, doesn't it? People absolutely adore Hero Quest. They remember the adverts that had Christopher Lee's voiceover and whatnot, and the very, very posh kids.
Fire of Wrath.
Yeah. Broadsold.
It's the Fire of Wrath kid that gets me every time.
He's so into it.
Oh,
That's
so
what I
into
like
it.
about it. He's so into it. He's not just slamming down a card. He's casting that spell.
Absolutely, he is. But it's not just the nostalgia. Hero Quest has a massive, massive following even now. There are like Facebook groups out there that are still making rule sets and new characters, and you know, there's people out there who are making new miniatures for it, like in the style of Hero Quest. There are companies out there that are making the bases so you can add other miniatures in. You know, you just change the base so you can put them onto the right one. There's a guy out there, I can't remember his name, it's Boris something. He has gone through and updated every single Hero Quest sculpt into modern styles. They are beautiful. They are absolutely gorgeous. And he sells them through his Etsy store or something. Obviously, he can't go to full production on it because...
No, of course. Yeah. For reasons.
Yeah, but I mean, the Chaos Warrior, one of the sculpts he's done, sets of sculpts, is the entirety of the cover art. So you've got the Barbarian in that pose, you've got the Dwarf in that pose, and you could do the entirety of the box art with the stuff he's made. It's gorgeous.
That's very clever.
Yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful stuff. And, you know, you go into like Shapeways or Thingiverse, the sheer amount of Hero Quest stuff out there is insane.
Yeah, there's a whole culture, isn't there? There's a whole culture
there really
could
is.
potentially be tapping into there. I mean, they kind of did on the Space Crusade side, because Blackstone Fortress is near as damn it Space Crusade.
Yeah, for all intents and purposes.
For all intents and purposes, it's a very similar situation. The game system isn't a million miles away. It's got a few more dice, a few more different shaped and coloured dice than Space Crusade did. But it's pretty much the same situation and setup. Yeah,
and it is to Space Crusade what Warhammer Quest was to Hero Quest. You know, the original Warhammer Quest. It's taking the feel of it and making a new game around that that sensation. You know, it's closer to Space Crusade than it is to Space Hulk because you can actually win at Blackstone Fortress.
Yes, you're not going to get swamped by Gene Stealers and murdered.
Yeah, we got the choice of which do you feel more positive about, being the Terminators in Space Hulk or putting your hand into a grinder.
Yeah.
You know, which one are you going to win?
Next time we have a gathering, Tom, I'll bring my copy of Blackstone Fortress and we'll have a bit of a game.
That would be wonderful. I've been listening to this, and the waves of nostalgia have been rolling over to me, because I spent so many Saturdays with friends from school playing Hero Quest, and particularly Space Crusade. And when they weren't available, playing their adaptations on things like the Spectrum.
Oh my goodness!
Actually, it was Guitar ESD with very rudimentary graphics, and it was wonderful, absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I had Space Crusade for the Amiga.
Yeah. Do you remember the really weird stuff about the Amiga Space Crusade?
The fact that the Gene Stealers became the Soul Suckers?
Yeah, Soul Suckers. Chaos Android. They dropped the name Chaos from everything.
Yeah, what was that about?
I don't know. There was some weird stuff going on in the background. Never been able to get to the bottom of it.
They are essentially recreations of the gaming system, aren't they? Of the board games. Yeah. And they were so atmospheric. I remember finding the Space Crusade one quite scary at the time.
Yeah, you've got that music in the background, that omnipresent, just environmental sound that just really got to you. Might be interested, Tom. I don't know if you know about the YouTube channel, but this week, because the entire lockdown has broken my brain and made me go into very strange things, I took the rule book from Space Crusade. You know the little narrative pictures that were there?
Yeah.
We had the pictures and the little bits of dialogue underneath.
Yeah, it had the kind of the time stamp, didn't it, of the assault on the space hold. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've taken all of that and I've made it into a 16-bit game intro.
That is astonishingly cool.
Yeah.
So it's got like Mega Drive music playing in the background, and it all just fades in and out like a Mega Drive intro.
Oh, brilliant!
Because part of my brain snapped, and I thought this would be a good idea.
Well, that's kind of what I remember the intro to the Space Crusade video game kind of had that, didn't it? You know, where it was just images. It was just still pixelated images. Rather than it being a sort of animated intro, because video games largely couldn't do animated intros back then.
Oh, no, absolutely not. One of the things I'm currently working on is taking all of the Hero Quest quest starts, the little bits of fiction at the front of the quest.
I loved those.
And turning them into PS1 era intros.
Oh, that would be so much fun. I loved those. They had such atmosphere.
Mm-hmm. So I've got a tester. I think I've pretty much got it. I just need to get the sound of the vocals right.
Brilliance, absolute brilliance. I mean, are you guys doing anything otherwise, hobby-wise, at the moment?
I'll let Tom go first.
Yeah, are you doing anything, Tom?
No, in terms of actually beginning to get back into plastic, I can foresee there's going to be a lot of very long evenings while I swear at my failing eyesight and coordination. So actually, that's probably me taken care of. At the same time, while being immediately eclipsed by my 9-year-old daughter, already probably sculpted to Golden Demon level after about the first 3 weeks. So that's my future in the hobby for probably the next few months.
Absolutely brilliant. She's doing Drakari, isn't she?
She loves Drakari.
So cool.
And she gets it. I mean, being a child who loves My Little Pony and all things light, she also loves all things sinister and horrifying as well. So I think this kind of, this is scratching where she's itching. So I do fully expect that if she was playing Warcry, she would have an unmade army, because it's quite simply the most horrifying thing I think it's probably the most horrifying thing that Games Workshop have ever sculpted.
Probably, yes.
There's
a Clive Barker quality to those sculpts. There's no doubt.
I was thinking about the Unmade and what makes them so horrifying. And I think it's down to the fact that, unlike a lot of GW Chaos stuff, the Unmade are something that could legitimately happen.
Yeah.
It's the extreme of what could physically, realistically happen, but removing your face and wearing it as a belt.
Yeah, it's more surgical than anything, isn't it? It's that notion of performing surgery on yourself or having it performed upon you. There's a sadomasochistic Cenobite element to those creatures, and I think that's what's disturbing about them. It's the same with the Homunculi and the Drakari, of course.
Yeah, actually, absolutely.
They are essentially Cenobites in space.
Mm-hmm.
They are wonderful. Be very worried about infection control and the effect of microbes if you're walking around without your skin on. But these guys aren't necessarily rational actors, right? So,
well, if you look at the main guy from the Unmade, he's got a little bag which I'm convinced is just covered in Savlon, and he just puts his hand in every half hour and just wipes it onto his face. or maybe it's salt and vinegar. I don't know. It's one of the two.
I love it.
Hobby-wise, oh my god. So I went mad. As you can tell, I don't leave the house very much at the moment. So I started making a update of the old Chaos Androids from Space Crusade.
Oh yes.
And they're done now. I've tried my best to make sure that they don't look just like Necrons.
Mm-hmm.
So they're finished. But of course, what do you need to go with Chaos Androids from Space Crusade? You need a Chaos Dreadnought, don't you?
Chaos Dreadnought, of course.
So in front of me now, I have what started off as a Titanicus Warcry, a Titanicus Warhound,
mm-hmm.
which I've used a Skull from the Skull box set and elongated the front and built a pair of suspension arms on the side, and I'm slowly but surely building a Chaos Android.
Well, I mean, that's actually quite difficult to make as well with the current miniatures ranges, because there isn't much that has the same profile.
No, there isn't. There's nothing that has the same profile.
No, I was going to say, I mean, even like the really old Chaos Android from Rogue Trader, you know, the one that's got that slightly Cobra-like look to it?
Yeah.
With the skull on the front and whatnot, the really old lead one.
Yeah.
Even that doesn't look like the android from Space Crusade.
No, it's been a nightmare. I do have a Chaos Android from Space Crusade by itself, but I really wanted to try and get something that was more in line with the current thing. So yeah.
Of course, they're not even called Dreadnoughts anymore. They're called Hellbrutes now.
Yeah. All right. So
they're a totally different thing now. In fact, I really love the Hellbrutes. I've got to say that's one of my favorite boxed sets they've ever released. It's so gribbly. It's so foul. It's not just a machine. You can see all of these like organic bits inside of it. And you know, the sarcophagus is open, so you can see the Chaos Space Marine inside, and all of these tendrils and wires are just burrowing through them. And apparently, if you read the background on these things, they are torture engines. They're living torture engines. When the Chaos Space Marine is interred inside these things, it's just tortured to the point of madness and beyond.
That sounds like what's been happening to me whilst I've been sitting here during lockdown.
So cool.
Yeah. Also, I've got ghouls that came with the Mortal Realms subscription series.
The ghouls, the old ones.
No, it's the ones that have been around for a while now.
Yeah, the sort of hunched over gangrel creatures that look a bit like Gollum.
Yeah, so I got the starter set that came with the Mortal Realms box set, because if you do the premier subscription, you get 4 or 5 starter sets. Mm-hmm. So yeah, go on then. So I've mixed that in with a load of Kroot bits and Flagellant bits and Old Empire bits to make them look like they are slowly devolving into horrible creatures. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool indeed.
And I hit upon the idea of, I know what I'll do. I'll paint all of their hands red. So it just looks like they've got big goopy hands.
Nice.
And then, of course, I've got the Heretic kill team and my Rogue Trader kill team that I still haven't finished.
Yeah, tell me about unfinished stuff. I mean, those Thousand Suns still stare at me from my desk. They still do. My unfinished Magnus the Red, who's been sat there for a good many a year now, who will be finished. I guarantee will be finished. It's just time. Time is the problem. Although I am desperately waiting on, because you know the War of the Spider book, which is coming, it has a whole new army list in it for the creations of Bile. So Fabius is not just an addition to the Chaos Space Marines anymore. He has his whole sort of subset of the Chaos Space Marines that play differently. They have their own stratagems and whatnot, and the stuff you can do. The leaks that have come about over the internet recently that show you what you can do with that army list is brilliant. You can mutate and upgrade so many of your units to make them into hideous genetically engineered monsters. It's very exciting. I think I might be starting a Creations of Bile army.
Oh, the Newman.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if there isn't a stratagem or something that allows you to upgrade a group of chaos cultists to the new men, they've missed a trick.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
If that's not the case. But we shall see. We shall see. And I'm just looking forward to the background. I mean, Fabius has been absent from the background for a long time. Long time. So seeing what he's been up to and how he's engaging with the new status quo of the 40k universe is going to be very, very, very interesting indeed.
Yeah, I think so. I very much think so. Shall we do some competition stuff?
Yes.
What I've got here is a collection of answers. The competition is that both Patreon shows that we do need names.
Okay.
They've kind of just existed in concept. We've been putting stuff out, but there hasn't been a unifying name for each show.
Right.
So I've got two £25 Games Workshop vouchers to give to the winners.
Oh, that's so cool.
So one is going to be for the show, which is, of course, the bits that don't make it into the full broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
And the other is, of course, the more spotlighted show where we focus in on
discuss something specific.
Yeah.
I've been actually re-listening to some of those, and some of them are really good fun. We need to return. We did say that we were going to return to some of those subjects at some point. We really need to.
We do. We really do. It's, as you say, time.
Time,
yeah. Time is the ultimate enemy.
Uh-huh.
So what I'll do is I'm going to work my way through some names and see which ones jump out at people, and we'll discuss them at the end. First set is ones that are for the Rambling show. Yeah,
which is just the bits from the sort of the beginning of the Fluffenhammer that we don't record.
Yeah. So we have Fluffitovers.
Fluffitovers. That sounds like some sort of hideous American packaged breakfast item.
It does, doesn't it? Fluffin' Bits with a Z.
Fluffin' Bits.
Mm-hmm. A Fluffin' Wives' Tale.
All right.
Demon Host.
Ooh. That one's good. I like that one.
Witter from the Warp.
That's good too.
Visions of Fluffiness.
That's cute.
Yep. And Discarded Fluff.
I like that. That's quite fun.
And the Unfortunate and Bizarre Munitorium of Dr. George and Dr. Adam.
That has a wonderful Gilliam-esque quality, but the problem is you're going to have to remember what that is while you're saying it without using tattoos on your arms. So that might be a
bit of a problem.
On a practical level, that's difficult to sort of welcome people to, isn't it?
Or to name a file.
Welcome to the Bizarre Mentoriums of Mr. George and Dr. Adam. Yeah, okay. Yeah. And for the other show, we've got Fluff On.
Fluff On. Okay.
Yeah. Fluff and Law.
That's quite good. That's nice and neat.
Fluff and Banter, which I think would actually be better for the other one. Hot Fluff.
I like that one.
The Discordant.
Ooh.
The Remembrances.
That one's very good, but I would assume there must be a 40k based podcast called that. There must be.
Under the Auspex.
That's very good too.
Trazin's Gallery.
I like that.
The Insanatorium.
Yeah, that's quite good.
And that's them. That's all of them.
Okay.
So I've got a collection of them which I think work really well. Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to see what you guys think stands out.
Okay. For me, for the first one, there were two that really stood out for me, and that was Demon Host and Witter from the Warp.
Okay.
I quite like those.
Tom?
Same Demon Host, because you're very likely to be able to remember it, and it has a bit of thing. I mean, there's some incredibly clever names and people who work very hard, but I think brevity is often the soul of wit, especially in any phrase you have to repeatedly say over the course of several minutes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I liked Demon Host and Witter from the Warp as well.
Yeah, those are the ones that made me really smile.
I do like A Fluff and Wife's Tale. But,
A Fluff and Wife's Tale is very good, I've got to say. I liked that too.
And I honestly, I adore the unfortunate and bizarre Munitorium of Mr. George and Dr. Adam. But you're absolutely right, trying to say that every single time.
And to type it, it may sort of cut off the episode name on YouTube,
Mm-hmm. So, are we going to say that Demon Host wins it? Because that's a 3 for 3.
I would go for Demon Host. I think Demon Host is pretty damn good.
Okay, right then. So, that was from Taz. So, I will get in contact with Taz and send him his £25 Games Workshop voucher.
Excellent.
And there's a reason I'm not telling you who they are until they win.
Of course, okay.
And, of course, the second set?
I had 4 here, actually. I liked Fluff and Law. That was pretty good.
Yeah.
I liked The Discordant.
Mm-hmm.
The Remembrancers, with the caveat that I'm fairly certain there must be something out there already called that.
Yeah.
And Trazin's Gallery. I loved Trazin's Gallery. That one kind of tickled me.
Yeah. Okay, Tom?
List. I quite liked Under the Auspex, which I thought was quite clever. And Fluff and Banter is wonderful, but may not be attached to the right product under these circumstances.
Yeah, I liked Under the Auspex and Trazin's Gallery. They were the two that jumped out at me. I also quite like the Sanatorium, but I think that's a name that I'm going to keep for something else.
Yeah.
For another idea I've got down the line. All right then, so we've all come and different ones. Oh, there was also the Fluff Pod. I've totally forgot about that one, which is, it's dropped and it's full of fluff, but it will be surely full of precision and deadliness. So, right then. So, if we said that we've got Trazin's Gallery, Discordant, and Under the Auspex
Actually, I'm going to throw in mine for Under the Auspex as well, because I rather liked that.
All right, then. In that case, we're going to go for Under the Auspex.
Excellent. That's great.
Which, looking at this, means I have to send 2 £25 vouchers to Taz. David
brilliant.
Thompson.
So well done.
Which I feel slightly guilty about.
They're pretty good, I've got to say. I liked both of those.
So, that's how we're doing that. So that's both of those shows now have names.
Excellent. Must remember.
Yeah, I'll write them down and make some logos and stuff. Right then. So with all that being said, is there anything else anybody wants to bring up before we start closing down?
No, it was no other than really. It's just very exciting at the moment. I can't wait to see more of what's coming out of Ninth Ed. I am really, really, really excited by this new edition of the game.
Well, Ninth Ed's got me thinking about a lot of stuff and looking at the way that the game's going to run. Mm-hmm. It's made me think that I really want to try and do this Weekender idea.
Yeah.
Where we run a narrative campaign over the weekend with small armies.
Well, it lets you do it, doesn't it? You've got that Crusade system, which is based... I mean, have you seen anything of this, Tom?
Yes, looking absolutely fantastic. Seriously.
I mean, the Crusade system they've got in there, which allows... It's basically the old Champions of Chaos system, but for every army. So you can play these little linked narrative games where your units can be upgraded or they can be diminished depending on how they fared in previous games. Yeah. It's absolutely wonderful. That for me. It's that mixing of the RPG and the tabletop war game. Mm-hmm. I'm so in on that.
So my plan is that you have 3 people to a table. Mm-hmm. So you have 3-way battles going on, and you have a narrative. A narrative that they have to complete during that battle. Mm-hmm. Plus, you get a couple of cards for each table, which shows an AI moment, which involves something else turning up into the battle.
Right. It's almost like a random element that's thrown in, yeah?
Exactly. And then everyone tries to work their way towards the centre of the city to find out what's in the middle.
Brilliant. Yeah, I love it.
I love that because it has a wonderful resonance with Rogue Trader, first Warhammer 40,000, which actually had a GM system, didn't it?
Yes, it did indeed. One as well.
And had to be, brilliant.
Absolutely needed one.
I'm going to start looking into how we're going to do that because that's something I'm desperate to do. And if it's a success...
it'd be a very nice thing to do after the current situation has diminished, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
As a nice sort of celebration. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would be nice.
I think it's something that you could run a 40k one year, then an AOS one the next year, and just keep doing that and having a good weekend.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Plus, I'm going to get Gorkamorka out and run a Mariana's Kart game as well.
Goodness me. That's a blast from the past.
Well, it means everybody can just bring those new buggies from the Space Marine Army. And
But the thing is, if anyone turns up with Eldari, they're going to win, aren't they?
Well, it depends, because I'm sitting here right now sculpting bananas for it. So.
All right. Brilliant, I love it.
When I say it's Mariana's Kart, I mean it's Mariana's Kart.
I know what you're going for. Mind those blue shells, you know?
There seems to be crude heads on sticks.
Brilliant.
Anyhow, so what would you like to pimp out, Mr. George?
They're just the same as usual. You can find me knocking about here on the Exaggerated Elegy channel, where you'll find Let's Plays and reviews of fiction and all sorts of stuff. You can find my published fiction over at strangeplaygrounds.com. You'll find links to all my short story collections there. New one coming out very soon. Should have been out by now, but with the current situation, everything's been put back, obviously. You can also chat with me over at Enigmatic Elegy on Twitter if you have a mind to do so.
Excellent. Tom, is there anything that you'd like to throw out into the world?
Oh, just some positivity, and you can find me online and in person at Shrewsbury Abbey. And it's been absolutely fantastic to be with you today, so thank you so much.
No, it's been a pleasure, Tom. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for nearly killing me with my coffee drinking. That was a wonderful life-affirming moment, and I was glad to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Thank you for your kindness and your continued survival.
And of course, for myself, you can find the Fluffenhammer over at YouTube, YouTube, of course, .com, user the Fluffenhammer. You can find us at thefluffenhammer.co.uk, capital T, capital F, because I've realised I'm an idiot and I put capitals into it. Moron! And there's a load of stuff going up on there. It's actually, weirdly enough, the site is incredibly busy at the moment.
It is at the moment, isn't it? There's a lot going on over there.
I've been just scheduling stuff coming out when I've got 10 minutes and half an hour free, and just been getting stuff and scheduling it. It means that there's that much stuff coming out. I keep forgetting to share it to social media because I am absolutely goddamn. You wouldn't believe I've done this for like 11 years, would you? You really wouldn't. Something in my brain has just gone. I don't know. It's weird.
Being a father might be part of it, Adam. I mean, you know, other priorities, you know.
Squiggling and his occasional noises and smells. Yeah. I actually considered the idea the other day of doing a little blog of a wargaming dad, what it's like to try and do hobby stuff whilst a small child is filling his nappy next to you.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people like having that experience now, you know.
Because the other day, I swear to God, I had the thought when changing a nappy, that's the colour of brown I need. Because I've been trying to teach myself how to do distressed leather. That's it. It's not good.
Inspiration does strike in the strangest places.
Yeah, it's not pleasant. Anyhow, with all that, I will say goodbye. You guys take care now, and thank you very much, Tom, for coming on today. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much, Tom.
Thank you.
See you all later.
Bye-bye, guys.
Spartans, what is your profession? Oh, oh, oh!